Hey everybody, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. This is a subject I've covered in the past with a more in-depth video. Today I'm going to do this simplified basic video on how to change your drive belt on the Vespa ET4 or LX, Piaggio Typhoon, Piaggio Fly, any of the scooters made by Piaggio with specifically a liter 2-valve engine as they refer to it. Pretty much this motor was used in North America from 2001 all the way up till 2013. You can look at my past videos for very in-depth videos on doing a full belt job and what the parts you're looking at, full videos on rebuilding the driven pulley and clutch. But today I'm going to just show you how to change a belt. You may ask, when do you change a belt? The factory recommends every 7,000 miles on this model. And my recommendation is if you have a scooter such as this one that's 17 years old and hasn't hit 7,000 miles, it'd be a good idea to change this part as the drive belt's made of rubber, just like a fan belt. I would say just change it every 10 years, regardless of mileage, if for some reason you're not racking up 7,000 miles. And of course that varies. If you have a Molosi kit or high performance parts or you're on the freeway with your scooter, I'd probably change it at 5,000 miles. If you just drive it slowly in town, you may even get 12,000 miles out of this belt. So let me start with the minimum amount of parts you need to do the belt job. I'd recommend the factory original belt. It's fairly inexpensive. There is an aftermarket belt also available on ScooterWest.com. And if you're looking to do a complete transmission overhaul on your ET4, look for the full belt service groups. We have both a standard group and a deluxe group that also includes the factory tools that I'll cover. Part number for the drive belt is 841213, and it's highly recommended that you replace this one-time use nut. It's got like kind of a locking washer on it that's pretty much destroyed after you tighten it, and that's 436783. So you want to have at minimum these two parts. Typically, you'd also want to have the rollers on hand, the roller guides. You may need a clutch. Of course, there's other parts. This scooter, unfortunately, has very low miles, but is 17 years old, so all we're doing is a drive belt on it. As for the specialty tools, of course, we have these new. These are ones that have been in our shop for a while. This is a Bizzetti tool, Tool ETV. This is required for locking up the drive pulley or the crankshaft. And for locking up the clutch to loosen the center nut is Tool ETC-IA. And if you are missing these, just look in the description of this YouTube video and I'll have all the item numbers in there. Some of the standard stuff that you'll need to have on hand, such as the tools, I'd recommend having brake parts cleaner, a little piece of sandpaper, typically an 80 or a 60 grit piece of sandpaper. I don't have it here. It can be any type. You can even use a Scotch-Brite pad, from your kitchen if that's all you have. A little flat blade screwdriver is helpful. You're going to need an 8mm wrench. You can either put it on a small 1/4-inch ratchet, not a wrench, or you could put on one of these spinners right here. Or maybe you have a power tool to take off the belt cover. Number 3, the larger size Phillips screw, and that's to loosen your air box. 3/8 drive ratchet. I also have a 3/8 drive torque wrench. Need a 19 and an 18mm socket. A little diagonal set of cutters to cut a single zip tie. And a torque wrench is very handy to have. You don't necessarily need something as sophisticated as this digital calibrated torque wrench, but just the basic torque wrench. These aren't critical torques, but you definitely don't want to be over tightening the crank nut or leaving it too loose. Both can cause damage. As an added bonus, we're going to also replace the standard silver belt cover with one of our Scooter West exclusive custom powder coated belt covers. So this is an OEM belt cover. It's been powder coated professionally, ready to bolt right on. And wait until we get started on this job. The original belt cover looks like it's a boat anchor. So here's the boat anchor I was referring to. This 17-year-old belt cover has been exposed to the salty San Diego ocean spray mist for quite a long time. You can see the powder coat finish is missing. Scooter's got very low miles otherwise, but that's the unfortunate thing, being either in the Rust Belt or being very close to the ocean. This belt cover does have a Kickstarter. I want to tell you one thing about the Kickstarter. They discontinued it after 2008. It was a completely useless Kickstarter. It's very difficult to start these scooters. If the battery's completely dead, the ignition system doesn't even work. It was more of a novelty. And I'll tell you, a lot of people crack the cases by trying to jump on this Kickstarter thinking they're going to kickstart the scooter. Depending on the year, some have different style scoops for the air intake. These older ones have a tube where it pulls the air from underneath the floorboard. Gonna need to cut the single zip tie that holds that little boot on there. Another thing you got to remove is your dipstick. At this point, you do not want to start the motor, otherwise you're going to end up with a mess of oil. Next, we're going to go ahead and loosen the air box. This might be a perfect time to also check your air filter. Air filter's already been checked in this scooter by one of my technicians. It's a screw right here. I'm using a number 3 Phillips, which is kind of the larger size Phillips. May also want to have a needle nose, because sometimes they don't magically come out like that. Keep in mind there's a star washer and a flat washer. And then the more accessible screw is the one towards the rear of the engine. Sometimes on scooters that are very rusty like this, these ones are coming out pretty nice. The screw, there's a chance that it might be rusted into the clip that it threads into, because the screw also retains the inner rear fender for the rear tire. So a pair of screws with the pairs of washers on them. To set them aside, they're both the same. Lift your airbox up, and that exposes all these fasteners, on the top. Next, we'll take that flat-bladed screwdriver, and there's 3 spots that have pry spots for this belt cover. If it's a very old one, take extra care prying these off, because they are pretty brittle on these older ones. The newer models, they went to a chrome cover. That's usually more durable. This one's still the original one. You can tell it's a little on the brittle side. And now we're ready to start dismantling the cover. First, we'll go ahead and remove this single nut under here. You're going to use that tool ETC-IA, which is the clutch holding tool. Mine's this Kickstarter. Rotate the tire. I have it on the center stand right here. And at that point, take your 19mm socket. Could do it with an impact wrench, like an air ratchet. And at this point, pull that single nut off. Underneath there is going to be a washer that you want to keep with the nut as well. I want to check that bearing when we do take the belt cover off. That bearing sometimes will run dry. But next we'll take the 11 screws off, and I'm going to show you all these screws. They have some extra surprises with them. So this first screw that's kind of here, this is one that some people miss. There's also a metal clip that holds the rear brake cable. So you pull that screw out, you can see there's a clip. So you can leave that attached to the rear brake cable, no problem there. This one, on some models, they do have a clip that will hold a breather hose for your final drive transmission. This older ET4 does not have that present. And at this point, I'll just go ahead, go all the way around. All the screws, 11 in total. And sometimes you have a ground wire either at this point or as on this ET4, you might not see in the camera, there's a ground wire right here. Want to make sure you reattach that ground wire, otherwise you may have a starting problem or burn up some wiring on the engine. So just go around. Typically these are all the same length. Sometimes they do use a longer pair of screws underneath the belt cover, but typically they're all the same. And we sell this Motion Pro tool. It's pretty nice, the quickly loosen fasteners without using electric power tools. Once they're loose, you just give it a spin. It's got like a ball bearing in here, so it works pretty well. A lot easier than trying to use a ratchet and separate the ratchet from an extension to kind of spin these screws out. So they're all loose. Boom, 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 boom. It's remarkable how nice these screws are, considering the belt cover looks like it's got a gentle dunking in the ocean or something. The one tool I didn't show is sometimes when they're really, really stuck, they have a tab here, a tab up here, and also a point down here that you either put a slide hammer, we have a specialized slide hammer in our service department, or you could tap them with a hammer. This one fortunately came right off, no problems there. And at this point, you gotta sometimes lift the air box out of the way. Go ahead and carefully pull that away. See more of the powder coating. There's also the shield in here. Set all your screws aside. We have all those screws available, including like full hex stainless steel kits if you want to upgrade your fasteners. So kind of pick a look on scooterwest.com, you'll see that stuff. If you have an older model, it is going to have this washer. If it's a newer model, late model ET4 or any of the LXs, this step is already built into the clutch drum. So do that, pull the clutch drum off. Not that bad looking in there. Of course, this has low miles, so the shoes have plenty of life on them. Got your dry belt there. And next, we're going to go ahead and bolt up this tool that locks this drive pulley. This is your starter Bendex. If you're having problems with the starter where the starter motor spins but doesn't engage with the motor, it's typically going to be that part right there that needs to be replaced. Oftentimes, I'll take it out and clean it if there's a starting problem, because it operates completely dry. But put that tool ETV, there's a peg that goes in that one dowel pin spot, and just use one of your belt cover screws to go ahead and tighten this lower spot. And it has these 3 little teeth that engage with this outer ring gear / pulley, and that's the whole starting system for these scooters. 18mm socket. So it's best to have an extension. Remove this, gives you good clearance. And I'm using a rather long wrench here. And go ahead and take this nut right off. Again, do not reuse this nut. Highly recommend replacing it. You got this Kickstarter gear. This pawl, it has pawls that engage with the Kickstarter. If you have a model without a Kickstarter, it's just a thick, solid washer. So it looks a little different in some models. And then a very thin washer. So keep that in mind. A super thick, like kind of washer looking thing that has splines on it, then a thin one. And go ahead and walk the pulley off. You want to make sure this is nice and tight on the shaft. It is. If those splines are damaged, I'd highly recommend replacing this outer pulley. You know, it has a little bit of give, and it looks to be in very nice condition considering the scooter's got very low miles considering it's a 17-year-old scooter. So there's no grooves in it because the belt will wear out the aluminum and wear grooves into it. No issues there. We'll be able to reuse that part. A little bit, I got the little bit thicker washer, single washer in there, take that off. At this point, you separate the clutch and pull the belt right off. And we'll go ahead and take that all the way off, kind of clean it up. Next, we'll go ahead and dismantle the variator. You could put a belt right back in, but at this point, you might as well clean the variator because a lot of times problems stem to the variator being dirty or having worn out rollers or just a worn out variator. Some of my other videos do show what a worn variator looks like. Of course, having grooves in his face. This face is very smooth without any grooves in it. The easiest way to remove the variator is kind of hold this variator pulley half, pull the boss out. And another problem with these ET4s, so oftentimes even before they need a belt, is this gets real gooey. It gets from that oil-light bronze bushing, kind of like gets the belt dust on it, and then you end up with a variator that kind of sticks. So it feels like the scooter's stuck in a higher gear. And I tip the variator down. See how I have it tipped down? And roll it right out. So you're less likely to lose any of the parts. So I only have one roller that fell out. Rollers, of course, look like they're in great condition. They may be dirty looking, but there's no flat spots in them. So I'm certainly going to reuse these. These are OEM rollers, yellow ones that are found on the 150. That's just how they color code them for the weight. And then you have this ramp plate, and it should not be stuck or stripped out. Check the quality of the spline, should be very tight. If it's stripped out, definitely replace it, because the last thing you want to do is damage your crankshaft. And believe me, I've replaced these crankshafts because people have left a variator loose or just put together poorly, and it causes some problems. All right, so we'll go ahead and clean up some of these parts. Typically in my shop, I have a parts cleaner that recirculates a solvent. But at home, you can improvise with brake parts cleaner, even soapy water, but you definitely want to dry the parts off so they don't corrode. Take your 80 grit or 60 grit sandpaper. The pulley halves, you want to give them like, just break the glaze that's on there, because you want the new belt to kind of seat and not squeal. Oftentimes if you put these glazed pulleys that have kind of seated with the original belt, they'll squeal a little bit with the new belt, and that could be, cause the belt to wear quickly. Same with the clutch drum. It's very glazed, and I would do this even though you're reusing the clutch. Just good to give it, break the glaze with that sandpaper. Don't need to get too wild with it. Variator weights come out, another pulley half. And you get to see I'm just putting a little swirl in it. That's all it needs, just to break the glaze on that aluminum surface. Could get wild and deglaze in there. I don't think it's really necessary. If you were taking apart this driven pulley, I would certainly do that. You want to check that, see if this driven pulley is smooth. So take your hands, and I take my palms and put them on top. And I'm going to use my fingers as I'm pulling up. I'm turning clockwise, and see how this pulls up. The motion is very smooth without excess of free play. You can kind of see how it clocks up in about a 45-degree motion. Very smooth. The grease is in good condition, hasn't leaked out. If you see grease that's spread all over these clutch shoes, you certainly need to rebuild this, or if grease is coming out here or grease is on the belt, it means the seals that keep the grease inside the pins of the driven pulley is leaked out. You have seals that have been compromised. Also check those bearings in there and make sure they have grease, because when the scooter's idling, it relies on those bearings to freewheel. The scooter's pulling forward like an automatic car transmission where they creep. That's probably your culprit. Those bearings, or you have a faulty clutch, or this nut is backed off. Any of those three problems will cause the scooter to creep forward when it's idling, and it shouldn't do that. It should be completely in neutral. These are the clutch shoes, very much like a brake shoe. Just give them a little cleaning. And then we'll go on to spraying down these parts. And of course, if you had compressed air, that helps too. Don't want to blow that dust around and inhale it. But the good thing about this spray brake cleaner is it takes the dust with it without making it airborne. So, and one thing, you don't want to spray down there and dilute the grease that remains, because we're just going to reuse that. Let that air dry just fine. The pulleys, there's usually a lot of grime. You see all that grime dripping out. That's from the variator. Roller weights wearing, they kind of leave behind residue in there. Go ahead and set that aside. Roller weights, I'm wearing like gloves that are nitrile, so they're kind of resistant to this solvent somewhat. And last, we'll go ahead and clean the belt, the bell for the clutch, and the boss that goes in the middle of the pulley of the variator. So this part is the most critical part to clean. You want to get any residue off it. It should be perfectly smooth and kind of look like a chrome finish on it. It's actually just a highly ground steel is what that is. So. And then you want to take a rag. Typically I like to use these disposable just shop paper towels. They're a lot more rugged than just regular paper towels. Go ahead and wipe everything and make sure the rag comes out clean. So we'll give it another wipe and it's looking like it's coming out very clean, so that's good there. Just wipe all the surfaces down. Those are pretty much air dried at this point. And the last part to clean out is a little solvent on the rag, and you could clean that oilite bronze bushing in here. So there's the residue left behind. You can just let this evaporate and then clean this out, or if you need to dispose of it, don't recommend dumping down the drain or anything like that. So we'll start by reassembling the variator. So I have all the pieces bare. Again, if you have worn rollers that have flat spots in them or they're just falling apart, I definitely recommend replacing them. These ones are perfectly smooth, even though they're a little bit discolored from the aluminum. No problems there. They have two sides, an open side and kind of a plastic closed side. So all I remember is open clockwise. So open always faces towards the clockwise, and that's with any of these scooters. They all turn, the same rotation on the crankshaft. And if you install them the incorrect direction, they typically wear out very quickly. So I'm holding the variator there, open towards my right or clockwise. Just go all the way around, put those rollers in those 6 slots right there. They're all the same weight on these models, so no problems there. Next, we'll go ahead and assemble the ramp plate. These guide shoes do wear out over time. This scooter's got very low miles, so no problems there. You see this section that kind of has the angles to it? That's on the top or the back side of this. So these will not install the incorrect way, so you got to flip them around. And at this point, kind of hold that. Rollers are all set in there. I don't want to tip it too much. And go ahead and drop this down onto those 3 bosses. And it should be very smooth. There's just a little bit of free play, and that's normal. If there's excessive free play, then you either got a worn barrier or variator, or those plastic bosses are heavily worn. Next, we'll go ahead and take this boss. It can be installed either direction. It's not really critical. And I'm kind of holding this whole variator like this, so it doesn't fall apart. Because if I let it go, those rollers will get out of place, and that will cause problems. So go ahead and tip that. Just kind of find the spot where it goes on. I'm still holding it. And at this point, just slide the whole thing all back. And it should go all the way back there. If the splines are knackered up, it's going to be difficult to get it in the correct position. So we take our new belt. You can see there's some arrows on the top. And we'll go ahead and pull that out. So the arrows are the direction this belt turns. So these motors, they do turn counterclockwise. So see when I rotate this wheel, with the forward motion for the wheel, this shaft is turning counterclockwise. This is the dry belt, the crankshaft that the variator is mounted also turns counterclockwise. So we're still holding it where these arrows are pointing to counterclockwise or towards the front of the scooter if the belt's up on the top, that label's on the top. So we'll fit the belt right into these V pulleys, and you can see it does not want to pull into this pulley. And like the example where I pretty much am steering this like a steering wheel to the right as I'm pulling up. Keep in mind that does have quite a tremendous amount of spring tension, not as much as the big CC scooters. And now I'm holding it just like that, and that's where you want the dry belt. So at this point, you may want to put a small amount of grease in there if it's pretty dry. There's no problems here. This has nice grease still in it. It's all been well sealed in there despite the corrosion on the outside. So just slide that right on there, and you have that. Before you forget, put the clutch bell on. It destroys the clutch if you start the motor without a clutch bell on it. It will completely destroy it. We'll put that thick washer only if it's equipped. Pretty much the older ET4s, the only things that have that. So next we're going to go ahead and put this fixed half drive pulley on. Out of the 3 washers, the middle thickness washer, which is like a little less than 1 millimeter thick, this goes right onto the crankshaft. There are no splines on that washer, just smooth. And then go ahead and get this pulley right on there. Go ahead and refix this piece here. Again, make sure your starter Bendix is all up in there. If you have problems with starting a scooter, you definitely want to check that out, or at minimum clean that piece. Pretty inexpensive if you do have to replace that starter Bendix gear. That's essentially what disengages the electric start motor from this gear. when the scooter started. Next, we'll put this thin washer and either a thick washer with no splines on it, or it could be the kickstart pawl, which looks like a thick washer with splines on it. You can take your new nut, and it's optional. I'm confident that I'll torque this to the proper 61 foot-pounds with a new nut, so it's not likely to ever really come off. But if you want the added security, you could certainly put blue Loctite on. I wouldn't recommend the red Loctite. But thread that on. And again, that's an 18mm socket. It turned out, the 19 will fit on it, which I did actually grab the 19, see how it's all loose there. But that's an 18mm socket here, so. And before you go any further, I just torque it by hand. See how the nuts, the shaft just barely sticks out past the nut? If you just tighten it by hand and that shaft is inside the nut, it means something's not put together back there. So pretty much, 59, 60, 61 foot-pounds, not too critical. I'm sure if you did anywhere from 55 to 65 foot-pounds, it would be perfectly adequate for this. You just don't want to put 100 foot-pounds on it, and you don't want to under-torque it. So I have the locking tool in there in one motion. Not quite one motion, 54 foot-pounds. And there we go. We're right to the correct torque on that. And zip our tool off. And next we're gonna have a little bit of fun and prepare our powder-coated black belt cover. So let's prepare the belt cover. You can see some differences. Obvious one being there's a Kickstarter on this older belt cover, while the newer style belt cover does not have a Kickstart boss. Another change is this air intake snorkel is much smaller on the original ET4 belt cover. The newer style, they use the much larger intake scoop. So in addition to the belt cover, I'm going to put this 876-166, which is the correct scoop for this style belt cover. The most important part about swapping parts between the belt covers is not the Kickstarter, but this inner metal shield. We do want to move that to our new belt cover. And that's there to deflect the wind into the fan blade that's on that driven pulley, so you have proper circulation of air to cool the drive belt. So go ahead and remove this inner shield. Sometimes I have Phillips screws. This one's got T25 Torex screws. They're just machine screws that are threaded right into the aluminum belt cover case. A little bit of rust on that shield, not important at all. And I'll show you what the Kickstarter looks like if you're looking to preserve the Kickstarter on your older ET4 LX model that did have the Kickstarter. Kind of access the components here, show you how those work. So the shield separator, we'll put that in the new one. This Kickstarter, you can see this gear here. When I act on the Kickstarter, it pushes that gear out. And see how the Kickstarter sticks? These are just notorious for being they're shitty. Just get to the point. But if you are looking to save this and make it work much better, so what I recommend is kicking the Kickstarter down and then pull this out and lubricate that shaft, put a small amount of grease on this groove here, and then while the Kickstarter is held in place, go ahead and engage that back into the with the gear, and then it will pull it right into to the spot there. So it is possible even to spray. This spring's very difficult to rewind without the factory tool. It is possible, but difficult. So I don't recommend taking that apart. I got 3 Phillips screws that hold that little scoop. We're just going to reuse the screws. The scoop is pretty useless since it's specific to this belt cover. So this cover just pretty much sets right in place. Again, some models don't even have this thing. It's just a little scoop in the front. These older ET4s are pretty neat that they pull the air from the front of the frame through, there's a plastic tube in there that directs the air. Go ahead and put the screws, just get them started, because these are going into plastic, so you may take some effort to get them all, you pull this in, so And just kind of go between them all, make sure they're all the way bottomed out. Don't over tighten them because they are going into plastic threads. And next we'll put the metal fan deflector shield. Pretty important to have this in place. You end up wearing out the transmission much quicker if it's not cooling. So. The later ones that don't have the air breather that pulls the air from the frame, they do have a foam filter in the little scoop. We do sell that foam filter usually on the older models. If it's 10 years or older, it's probably deteriorated and just needs to be replaced. If it's less than 10 years old, you can take it out, clean it with something like that brake cleaner or soapy water, and put it back in place just to get the dust, cat hair, whatever else builds up in it. And these screws sometimes are a little tight to go, you know, because they're kind of thread forming machine screws for the aluminum. Sometimes you'll hear a metallic rattle, kind of like that. It means these screws are a little bit loose or missing. I've seen them straight missing. And of course I'm doing this with this powder coat. You know, it's very durable, but don't want to grind it against the metal workbench or lift that I'm working on here. And voila, all tighten. Last two things to look out for on a belt cover. This bearing's in perfect shape, it's brand new, no problems there. But if that bearing's rough or sounds really noisy, I'd recommend replacing it. It's pretty inexpensive. And the last thing to check is this little bronze bushing for your electric start. Sometimes you have a noisy electric start and it could be that bronze bushing has grime and dirt in it. So we know the belt cover's ready to go on. It's going to be a two-handed operation. You want to shift the air box up, put the area that's the spigot, you know, the oil spigot, and get that in place. Then you're going to need to lift the air box quite a bit, as much as you can lift it. And at that point, you get the dowels, the dowel down here, and there's a dowel back up here. Get them lined up. Give it a couple taps. Make sure nothing's pinched, such as that ground wire that I disconnected right here. This right down here. And at this point, we'll go ahead and put all the screws in. And I would just recommend starting them all by hand, because if you use a power driver, you're going to end up cross-threading one of them and end up with a much bigger mess on your hands. All right. And then I'll quickly tighten them. And if you're going to use a torque wrench for this, about 7 foot-pounds is all they need. At this point, this belt cover's not all the way seated. I would just get them all, you know, seated. So pretty much where the bolt seats. See how it's starting to pull the belt cover? You don't want to go too crazy. You can easily crack one of those edges off. See how the belt cover's kind of moving a little bit. At this point, go ahead and tighten them. In something like this, I just give it a little palm twist and keep track, going diagonal, giving the final torque. If you're using a little ratchet, that works as well. You don't want to be using the big 3/8 ratchet. And we got all 11 of them tightened up. Gonna put the single washer here onto your shaft, and here's a little trick. I usually turn the wheel, and then see, I'm just turning the wheel like if you're moving the scooter forward, and I tighten that by hand. Then make that engage, turn your torque wrench on, or set it if it's a mechanical torque wrench. And you do not need to go the full 60 foot-pounds, only about 45 foot-pounds, somewhere around there is good enough for this nut here. And I'll just look at the screen on this. There we go. We'll go ahead and carefully snap this back in. Later models do have little rubber plugs in there. This older cover is a little, like I said, it's a little on the fragile side. So just take some extra care. Using my palm hammer. You just use that. It's a good soft hammer. Don't forget to put your dipstick in. If you have the rubber boot here, the ground wire's sometimes in the way, tip that. Go ahead and put the rubber boot over this intake. And to secure it, you just use a regular zip tie. Let's go around that rubber boot, make sure it's even all the way around that spigot there. Cut the zip tie. And now we'll go ahead and seat the air box. So you got to kind of work the air box over those aluminum studs right there. Washers are all in place. And I recommend getting both of them started before tightening them all the way down. So sometimes you'll have trouble getting them started. And if that's the case, sometimes you just got to move the fender around to get everything to line up. So no problems. Should be nice and easy to thread in, and when it's bottomed out, go ahead and torque the screwdriver here. And that's pretty much it. The little side skirt, took that off. There's a single screw that holds that. And we can put that back in place. So put this little side skirt in, there's just a single screw that retains it. There's 3 of these rubber grommets in the frame. So kind of tip the whole thing, give it a 3 little pounces, and this little lower part actually hooks onto the frame. And sometimes it's pretty difficult as these things are aging, you know, the plastic's a little bit warped. Put the single step screw in this hole right here underneath the tail part of the floorboard. So congratulations, you made it to the end of this video. You too are now a YouTube certified technician. So let's see if I'm certified, and let's see if the scooter still starts. Sounds all nice and quiet. It's a little noisy on the lift. And it's normal for it just to rotate a little bit when it's idling, but we'll take it on a test ride, and I'm certain it operates just fine. All right, so we're all done. Thanks again for watching and making it through the end of this video. And support our channel by just purchasing merch on scooterwest.com. Whether you buy a t-shirt or you buy a full accessory package, it helps us out, and the whole team of dedicated scooters here at Vespa Motorsport and scooterwest.com here in San Diego, California. Keep your eye up for the scooter popping up for sale at our web store. It's got a little bit of a story that I'll share in another video. Until next time, this is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport, Scooter West. Follow us on Instagram, Vespa Motorsport. Follow us on Facebook. I think it's also Vespa Motorsport. And hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, if you want to know everything about Vespas. If you don't, subscribe anyways. Maybe you'll like Vespas someday.